Well, hello, everyone. Good to see some, I see the names, the returning sailors and some new ones for our second Wanderlust series on a, I don't know, is it like negative something outside? It doesn't matter. We're inside and we're hearing about good sailing stories. So we are also, I know somewhere out there, we have kind of fellow yachtsmen from Sailorville Yacht Club in Des Moines, Iowa. So that's kind of fun. That's glad the word is spreading across the states about our adventurous members. And so I don't know if Jolene has any PSAs, but now we're going to relax and let Walter Rush transport you into warmer climates.
All right. Well, and I apologize, folks. I know there's static on my end, so I will turn my mic off as soon as I'm done. But just want to let you all know we are recording this session. Please keep your cameras and microphones turned off during the presentation. If you don't, I will turn them off for you. We'll do a Q&A at the end of the program. And so at that point, when Walter is done with his presentation, if you want to turn your microphone and or video on at that time, that would be just fine. Otherwise, if you want to put questions in the chat during the session, we will do our best to keep track of those and read those at the end as well. Otherwise, I think that is it. So we can sit back and enjoy. Walter, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, let me make sure. Hold on. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Yeah, hold on. It makes me odd. Okay. Am I showing my screen?
Yeah, your screen is up, but not your picture or not your camera.
Okay, so I can just start going.
Yep, if you don't want people looking at you, yes.
Okay. Oh no, I don't need people looking at me. So I'll just stick with the slides. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about my experience on adventure with the Bermuda 1-2. So this is a sailboat race with two distinct legs, and each leg is 635 miles. The first leg is single-handed to Bermuda. And the second leg is double-handed back. And just a couple sentences from the NOR, the Bermuda 1-2 is intended to be a sporting event encouraging seamanship, competition, and fellowship among offshore sailors of all nationalities. In the tradition of shorthanded sailing and passage making, while recognizing the inherent danger in the sport, the 1-2 is organized so as to emphasize, promote, and to encourage development of techniques, equipment, and technology which will foster safe and seaman-like shorthanded sailing. And I just also want, before we start, I just want to thank the Wanderlust Committee because it was kind of fun going through this whole experience again and having to dredge through all my notes to put this together. So just a quick introduction for people who don't know me. This is who I am. You might have seen me out there. I'm a psychiatrist in Minneapolis. I'm married to Kate and two kids, Leaf and Ruby, who were often there. I grew up sailing on San Francisco Bay with a laser. And then after I moved to Minnesota, I discovered the lakes and kind of got back into sailing. I had a Hobie 18 over on what was called Calhoun then, until actually Mike Maloney invited me to keep my Hobie in a slip at Shorewood. And that's how I got started there. So now the J27 was just supposed to be my practice boat before going cruising. And so I had never raced a day in my life. And so we stayed at Shorewood for 8 more years, and we raced with WYC on Thursdays before moving over to keep our boat at WYC. So we were here for a year at WYC, then we were gone cruising, and I also did this event for a year, and then we were back for a year. So the idea of sailing alone kind of evolved out of my interest in cruising and being able to do so competently with my family on board. On my first trip offshore, I paid to go on a Swan 48 with this outfit called 59 North. And I did it as a way to get an ocean experience. I had actually signed up for this for a rally, almost went as a crew member, and then one of the boats tried to divert and had an accident, and a crew member died. And I thought maybe going as a crew member was a bad idea. So I paid to go on this crew, and I was just soaking up everything they were teaching me that trip, and really begun to appreciate all the significant forces going on with that boat. And thinking it might not be manageable just with me and my family offshore. So, and I actually, at that point, I was starting to imagine sailing alone offshore. So my first words when I hit the dock after that trip was, I need a smaller boat. And I bought this boat. So this is Griffin. This is a Morris Justine. It's a 1993 boat. And I bought this boat a month after that trip in 2015. And so we'd been aboard a similar boat, and so we had an idea what we were doing, or not. So the Bermuda 1-2 was really, and this was my way to learn how to be single-handed. One of my takeaways from WYZ is that the racing really has taught me to sail better. If not for my time at WYZ, I probably wouldn't have sought out, a race as a way into the single-handed sailing. So, but before signing up for the race, I did get to know the boat first. I had taken 2 trips. I had sailed to the Caribbean and back, both times with crew, and we'd done about 10 weeks of cruising as a family. I also had the experience of Hurricane Irma, which actually derailed a bunch of my sailing plans. My costs were insignificant compared to that borne by the people who were, this was in Nanny Cay and Throttle when this happened. But my own, the bright spot of that was I did have to put my boat back together and worked with a lot of people to do so, and learned a lot about my boat, which I think makes me safer offshore. So the Bermuda 1-2, what all they want you to do is to have what's their qualifying passage, which is 100 miles or 30 hours in the open ocean single-handed. So obviously it's going to be longer than 100 miles. But there is a difference between just what they require and actually being ready for the race. But for my qualifiers, I did just an out and back from a Northeast Harbor, which is up on Mount Desert Island. Out 50 miles, turned around, came back. Of course, I'm back too early, so went back out and timed myself to come in at 30 hours. They thought that was perfect. I also arranged to sail in something called the Main Rocks Race, which is out of Penobscot Bay and goes around 2 rocky islands, Matinicus Rock and Mount Desert Rock. That race would have qualified too. It actually got called before we reached the finish line, probably before we reached the 100-mile point. So I don't know if it would have counted. Also before the race, experience I got was single-handed sailing down from Maine down to bring the boat down to Newport. So I sailed to Cape Cod single-handed. Equipment failures on those during those few trips. The first trip I woke up to find a 1/2-inch clevis pin, 2.5-inch long, sitting on my deck. And the mast had just been set up by the riggers the day before. So I'm thinking, where did this come from? And, I'd already corrected a bunch of mistakes that they'd made, such they'd rigged the reefing lines, they'd crossed them. It turned out it was just a pin attached to the rigid vang on the boom. But that was the first time I really started to get the impression that maybe I needed to have a little more trust in the people I was having work on my boat. Another thing happened that trip was my throttle cable failed. And I only found this out because I was charging my engine. And then at the end of it, I went to just put in gear. Sometimes it helps to feather it, I think. But anyway, I found that I wasn't shifting. 3 hours, I'm in the middle of the shipping channels coming in and out of Boston, and it's the middle of the night, and I got a little bit of wind. So 3 hours later, I figured out that I could move the lever that the cable went to. So the cable on my shifter was broken, and I figured I could move the cable if I crawled into a lazarette and used the handle of a hammer to push it back and forth. So I probably should have really thought about these things that broke as kind of a sign of things to come. So the Bermuda 1.2 has you has a safety list, an appendix to the NOR, and it's fairly extensive. They did not specifically require a safety course, but I read a book thoroughly. The heart of the safety inspection, the heart of the safety requirement is really the safety inspection, and it's done by a previous sailor, and that it was done by the guy in the middle here. The guy in the middle, and incidentally, the guy on the right, that's my crew member. So what it was is a 2-hour discussion between these 3 guys and me sitting down on my boat. I mean, we pulled stuff out, we checked for expirations, we fixed the emergency rudder. I mean, we fitted the emergency rudder. But it was really discussions of what would you do if, and why do you carry this, and how would you respond to this kind of situation that probably taught me more about safety than I'd known before, than any previous experience. So that was kind of the beginning of getting to know what this whole event was about. So I did a lot of my own boat prep. I had, for months before, I was keeping lists. I had a ship's log, and I would bring it back and forth from the boat. All these things I had to buy, pieces or tools I had to collect. Of course, it also, being in a race, I think this boat came with original sails when I bought it. So this was my opportunity to buy new sails. And that led me to this guy, Joe Cooper, who does a lot of work with the 1.2. He was Australian Cup captain in the 1980s America's Cup, and then he's been really involved in the mini class as well. So anyway, in our conversation, he ended up changing me to a single line reefing system, or changing me from a single line reefing system that I had to a reefing system with a dedicated line at each kringle on the luff and the leech. So then I would have 6 lines coming back to the cockpit, and the lines actually came back. So they all come back to clutches. They actually come back on the opposite cabin top to the one you're looking at. So this cabin top, and the reason this yellow line is here is for the reefing system. He suggested that I have the 2 inline clutches for the main halyard. And the idea there is that when I want to reef, I can shut the front clutch and then pull the length of rope through, which is demonstrated by this yellow line here, and then close the back clutch. And then when I want to drop the sail to my reef, I can drop exactly the amount of line I want and have it just in the right position, and then just spend a second tensioning the halyard, and I'm good to go. So that made, these changes made reefing really comfortable to me. So I can reef, I'm very confident that I can reef quickly without going on deck, at least 3/4 of the time. I can do it with a lot of wind, and I can do it at any point of sail, and it's fast. So I also did a lot of prep at home. Oh, well, hold on. One more thing Cooper recommended was putting in a Solent sail. So we put in a Dyneema stay, and then I had the Solent sail, which was like a 100% jib. So that prevented me from getting into the situation where I'm trying to sail with a partially furled Genoa that can't get any luff tension when the wind is high. So this is some of the work that I did at home. I worked a lot on splices. So I spliced all my own halyards. I spliced these loops on the, I stripped the ends of the Genoa sheets and put these loops in there. And then you could earth hitch, or also called a luggage tag, to the clue. and it prevents it from getting caught on the crowded deck of a cruising boat. And then I made these soft hanks to use. That's why I had to tell you about the Solent sail. So the soft hanks were to hank on that sail. And these the critical point in making these soft hanks is getting that stopper knot really tight. So let me see. So at this point, I'm also gathering spares and tools, like I said, for the race, and I'm collaborating with my crew. Initially, I was working a lot with a yard in Maine as they were making these changes to my reefing system, working with sail makers. So it always feels like I'm in touch with someone out there. The race invites you back twice a year for what they call a GAM. So a GAM is actually an old term for a gathering of whalers. So I went back for this talk in March, they gave two talks. The first guy gave a talk on his experience doing the route to Rum, and the second guy did a talk on the Gulf Stream. And I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about that. So, and this was also the first time I'd met my crew member face to face. So after the GAM, we were encouraged to look at these maps at least a couple times a week to get a sense for how things change and for what's going on with the Gulf Stream. So this map right here is the Gulf Stream at the time of our race. So basically, I mean, think of the Gulf. I'm just going to talk a little about the Gulf Stream now, because that was a pretty interesting and emphasized part of our preparation. So, but think of the Gulf Stream as a clockwise current going all the way around the North Atlantic, where we cross it, you know, on this line. So this line is a line between Newport and Bermuda. So where we're crossing it, it's 60 miles across. But as you can see, there are a lot of currents off to the side, which can affect a lot more of our route. So there's a significant water temperature difference between the water in the stream and especially the water to the north. So that gives us a good means of measuring its location. So this map right here is showing sea surface temperature. And it's really, so think of it just measuring the skin temperature of the ocean. So this one happens to be from Rutgers University. Then you also have these slides, you know, the naval data, which gets put out. Each of these come out in a different form. I also like to use the Ocean Prediction Center at NOAA, and that's a really easy site to navigate. People all the weather guys got excited when the naval data became unclassified. So then this map is showing it using slightly different technology. So this is using altimetry data. So this is measuring sea level differences in sea level height. And you wouldn't think it was so significant, but if you look over at the far left, I mean, you're getting variations. This is in centimeters. So you're getting variations swinging from 90 below to 120 above. So this, you know, the sea level is varying by over 2 meters within some of this area. So warm water is higher because think of heat expands. Now these maps are looking at, so the altimetry data tends to look at it from a very large scale perspective. One advantage of the SST is that it offers a little more detail. However, the altimetry data cuts through cloud cover. And if we go back to this one right here, the white streak you see, that's cloud cover. And this is actually a composite image taken over several days in order to minimize that cloud cover. So that's a real limitation for the SST. Just going back forward, the Gulf Stream is not static. Its location is not static. It tends to meander off to the side, either to the north or the south. So this little cartoon shows the formation of what's called a ring. So it starts off with a meander to the north, and as the meander accentuates, and eventually it'll come back on itself and then it'll pinch off. So this process creates what's called a warm core ring because the warm water from the south side of the ring is trapped within it. So warm core will always move in a clockwise direction. Now, the same process mirrored on the south side of the stream is going to create a cold core ring, which is basically the same process. But if we look back at some of our maps, I just want to go back over some of these maps, having thought about this idea of rings, and it just, you can start to understand a lot more. You can see through this data, there are several cold core rings to the east. There is one, it looks like there's a warm core ring. There's also, it looks like a cold core ring is forming right across our course. And because this will probably eventually pinch off here and spin down to the south. If we look back at the naval data, you can see they've drawn the rings in and they've just written C or W as a prefix to the ring. And you're supposed to know whether that water is flowing clockwise or counterclockwise. If we go back to the SST or to the initial sea surface temperature graph, one thing that SST has difficulty doing is picking up any rings on the south side of the stream. And what happens is those rings, since they're cold core rings, the cold will sink and warm water will wash across it. And this is just getting skin temperature. So you miss a lot of rings. And with all this, I've never been able to sail to actually catch one of these rings. I keep trying to. The data is static from when you leave. So, I mean, it changes, I should say, it changes slowly enough. These features tend to move in a southwest direction at about 10 miles a day. So it's not going to change much over the course of a 5-day race. So the map we're looking at when we leave is pretty much the map we can expect to find. So going on, prior to the race, this was the kind of bedtime reading I was doing. It actually helped me sleep better, I think, because it gave me an idea. At least I felt like I was preparing. One topic that made an impression on me was cresting waves. And the statistic is that if taken beam on, waves that are 60% the length of your boat will flip you every time. A 30%, if it's 30% the length of your boat, it'll flip you some of the time. So for me, that's a 20-foot wave is going to flip me every time. So you might think you can steer. Well, first of all, how long can you steer? And second of all, steering can get unreliable at times. This hasn't happened to me, but according to the book, you'll end up with very aerated water sometimes on a wave and your rudder doesn't work, or you might end up with water flowing at different speeds over your rudder, potentially even backwards over your rudder, so that it's really difficult to maintain either stern or bow to the waves. So this led me to get a Jordan Series drogue. I still admit I haven't practiced with it. I'm not convinced my attachment points are strong enough, and that's actually something I'm talking to a yard about now. It does give me the option for steering my boat if I lose the rudder, because I guess it's possible to run these amidships out some of my hose pipes, and I can pull on the sides to either the starboard or the port side of the boat enough that people have done it in tests. So just another look at the boat that I'm basically going to sea with, and kind of comparing it to the Extreme. So I'm biased. I think I have a beautiful little boat, and I think she has wonderful curves. But you know, everyone's got their own reason for buying their boat. I mean, there are so many pros and cons, and everyone wants to show you the top half of their boat, and I really think the money is kind of looking at the hull. A couple contrasts between that I can think of between my boat and and the Imoca 60 here. First of all, the Imoca 60 is going to be very stable upside down. Once it rolls all the way, I don't think it's going to come back. Whereas a wave will probably push me into a position where I would roll back up. So if you're going to have a boat like the Imoca 60, you might want to make sure someone from shore is keeping an eye on you in case something bad happens. The second consideration is the fullness of my hull and also the lack of flat sections in front of the mast. So that creates some buoyancy in the front. Now there's a lot of times when your boat is not parting the waves like we do on Minnetonka, but actually smacking down on the waves from above. And the idea is that slanted bow and more slanted front sections or less flat sections in front is going to allow for a smoother ride. And I do think my boat's, smoother than some of these others. That being said, my V-berth is still unreliable offshore, and my son still gets seasick. I was hoping to have a boat where that didn't happen. But the idea is that the slanted sections could part the water a little easier than the flat section of a lot of modern boats. Okay, so we finally get underway. So this race starts in June. So I think this was June 9th or something out of Newport. They offer you a mentor. So one thing I've heard my mentor say several times, the ocean quickly finds every chink in your armor. I really had no idea so much stuff would break. And it breaks in the context of being completely in the wilderness on your own. And you start to feel like boundary water skills are more important than sailing skills. I thought I'd made every effort to prepare this boat. I thought I'd turned over every stone. Things just kept falling apart. So before the start, my autopilot was actually acting up. This was discouraging because I thought I'd figured out what the problem was, and I'd replaced the control head in the cockpit. And I was good the few days before, and all of a sudden I'm leaving the fuel dock, and literally as I'm raising my sail, my autopilot is failing. So this is me trying to get my spinnaker up and not wanting to tell people that my autopilot is failing because I didn't want people to tell me I shouldn't go. I actually didn't tell Kate until several days into the race that my autopilot was failing. Other failures were soon to come. My entire electronic system, granted it was a little old, it failed. I had 2 sails problems. I lost the halyard to this Solent sail that we had devised, and it chafed through, and I ripped the luff of my mainsail. I also flushed the thermometer down the toilet. I didn't have my instruments didn't give me a way to measure sea temperature, and that's a good way to know if you're in the stream. So I bought a fish tank thermometer and used it. I was planning to just measure the water to dangle in the ocean. And a guy said, well, gee, why don't you just flush your toilet? That would bring water on board. Well, it sucked the end of the thermometer down the toilet, and it was gone. Offshore sailing is all about finding solutions that allow you to continue. The autopilot was a difficult loss. That was, I did get it running again, and it worked for a day, but that was the end of that. Prior to the race, I had set myself up with this monitor wind vane, and I was determined to use it. So I was thinking, okay, this autopilot, I can get past it because I can use the wind vane. It had been fitted the previous fall, and I had it for the main rocks race. But I really did not know how to use it well. I knew the basics, and I had the book. Basically, a wind vane is an ingenious design. It's very time consuming to learn because it involves getting the sails balanced, the vane in the right direction to the wind, and then getting this little key into the helm while the helm is moving just in the hole that you want to get it into, and getting all these three parts to balance with each other. So without the autopilot to help me out, I would spend over an hour just trying to set a course. Admittedly, I wouldn't have put this kind of effort into it. I mean, in a way, it was kind of a blessing because I wanted to learn how to use the wind vane, and I did. And it was hard, and I probably would have just used the autopilot if it hadn't failed. The loss when the electronic system failed completely, I guess I was less alarmed. I mean, I'm thinking like, what the hell? Why is everything breaking? I mean, I could get by. I was used to using paper charts, and I had several ways of getting GPS offshore. I had a dedicated little Garmin handheld $100 thing. I could get GPS off my Iridium Go, which I use for satellite. I had, and my iPhone and iPad were actually both giving me GPS coordinates. So paper charts were fine, several means to get GPS, except when a wave comes in the companion way, an errant wave, and comes and soaks your map. And so now I have this map that's basically wallpapered to my desk. And if I try and move it, it's tearing. And the only way I could mark my position was with dots from a Sharpie, but it got me there. So the entire time I did not lose VHF, which was nice because the race strongly encourages us to have radio contact with competitors, and actually assigned people to make radio contact with each other, although those responsibilities quickly fell apart. But anyway, that ended up allowing me to be reassured that they could see me on AIS, because my AIS stopped working too, which was really starting to affect my sleep. But when they reassured me that they could still see me, even though I wasn't seeing them at all, that made me feel better. I was able to get the radar working again. And I don't really know what I did. And when it started working again, then I just didn't touch anything after that, because I didn't want to lose the radar. So I mentioned the Solent halyard chafing through. Part of the system design was we had put this diverter, what you're seeing where it says chafe point. So that's a diverter, that's on the top of the mast. And this is the Dyneema stay right next to it. So the diverter was offset to starboard to divert obviously the halyard around this stay, because I didn't have a mast opening for it. So, and it chafed on the bottom on starboard tack. And so during the race, I mean, your halyard blows, basically put away the sail. There's nothing I could do. In Bermuda, we fished out the halyard and we tried to find solutions to make it not chafe. But I mean, it was 6 months and 4 countries later that I finally figured, you know, this bottom design, which was replacing the shiv with a low friction ring, that I think the system has stopped chafing now. It seems to be working well. This was the tear in my luff. This is kind of one of those things, I think I was almost in tears when this happened. Sometimes you can get really overwhelmed out there, but I really felt bad. I mean, I just spent a lot on these sails. I was proud of my new sails. So what I had done is I had tied a sail tie up around the mast, and I can't remember what I was doing or what I was trying to achieve by doing that. What I do remember is that when I tied the thing around the mast, I had told myself, come back for that, because that can't be there. So I was shaking out a reef and I could feel a little resistance in the winch, and then all of a sudden it went easy in. So then I knew I had a problem. So my condition, the condition of our skipper at this point in the race, so you start to combine the equipment losses, how tired I am from the physical exercise, as well as the loss of sleep and this challenging environment, which never sits still. it's not usually as flat as this. But you don't bring out the camera when it's not flat. So it all starts to take its emotion. It does start to take an emotional toll. It's draining and can be overwhelming. And like I said, physically tired, sleep deprived, bashed about from this boat, doesn't stop moving, and alone. And they're starting to take, my equipment away from me. I've lost my chart plotter. I've lost my autopilot. What else am I losing? So here you come out to a race and you think you want to think about sailing fast, but you're way distracted by problems. And I'm spending my time digging out manuals, trying to find spare parts, texting people for mechanical advice on how to fix things, because that is allowed. I'm pretty much always wet, soaked if I've recently been on the foredeck, though I still duck when the water comes flying across into the cockpit. Comfort, you hardly consider comfort. Comfort doesn't get achieved very often. I do try and maintain a corner of dryness in my bunk, and I wedge myself into corners to when I needed to try and eat something, or if I needed to try and get something done, so that at least while I'm doing it, I'm not being thrown around. There's definitely, I started to get worried about injury. I always had little cuts and scrapes on my hands, which don't heal in salt water. So I was obsessively using dry Band-Aids whenever I would come inside and lay down. I twisted my knee doing something that was pivoting and had to be extra careful for a few days. I wrapped an ace bandage around it, which did help. And I would try and consciously avoid risks and going on deck. And if I did ever go up on deck, I'd rehearse in my mind every step I had to make and try and think of every tool I could bring or what tools I would need so that I didn't have to come back to the cockpit again. All right, things seem to have froze up. My computer is frozen. Okay, oh, there we go. All right, sleep. So everyone, so this is definitely a big topic. One of the single-handers, first time he met me, and within 5 minutes, he's asking me what I'm gonna do about sleep. So they say we're supposed to wake every 20 minutes to scan the horizon. So 20 minutes is about how long it takes for a ship to appear from the horizon and to run us down. It seems to work for some people. I tried it the first night and did not do well. Basically didn't sleep much. And the second night I gave up. I mean, at this point I'd passed the continental shelf. I knew it was reasonably safe. I turned off my alarm. 4 hours later, I woke in a bit of a panic, but everything was fine. And then I went back to sleep and slept 4 more. Thereafter, I usually slept in 2-hour segments. Oftentimes I'd wake up before that with something jostling or if something wasn't quite right. And so more often it was like hour and 20 minutes, I'd say. I didn't sleep as well once I lost the AIS. I didn't have a good picture for the sleep slide. So this is my cat. And so I used to think about offshore, how this cat is so entertained by this ball. And I've got to do this elaborate ocean race to entertain me. One thing about sleep, I did have this recurring dream that other people were on board. And then I would wake up and I would have to basically reorient myself and adjust. It's like I said, it's difficult emotionally, but it's also such an amazing place to be. It's just a constant sense of awe, just to be where you are and to appreciate that you're doing this and you're completely on your own and you're trying to exist with nature. And so that's a very powerful element of it. But it's just constant. The problems are just piling up. I mean, either the bilge pump is cycling or the engine's not charging, or I'm making my 5th attempt to fix the navigation system, or I'm needing to spend an hour, rereading the wind vane manual. So sometimes the problems just really start to feel like a weight. But when something really significant, what I discovered about myself is when something really significant happens, I tend to be quiet, calm, and just very focused. And sometimes I'll just sit down and think about, what do I need to do? I go through my options, and if I actually make any actions, I tend to be really deliberate. And I kind of think it's kind of like that advice where they tell you in an emergency, smoke a cigarette. And sometimes it just is like that. I almost start thinking slower. Sometimes I think this occurs because expressing anger or feeling anxious is going to do nothing to solve the problem. And it's just a use of energy that I can't afford. Now, that being said, little things like I remember the granola flipped into the air as I was reaching for the blueberries, and that just set me off, and I was so goddamn pissed. And, and I'm down on my hands and knees trying to make the floor safe again, and I'm swearing at myself from this loss of food and loss of time. And there are times when fear does motivate me before departure. I would definitely have a fear that I would leave something unprepared, and that could raise the chances that I would die. Every time something came to mind, I would write it down on my list. And until I wrote it on my list, it would bother me. But if I got it down on paper, I knew I was going to take care of it. And these are obviously dolphins off the bow. Some of the amazing experiences I've had out there, though, sailing at night can just be amazing when you're out in the ocean and you can't see anything off to the side of you. And it's like a sensory deprivation because you can't even see the water. I mean, you can see the water that's right next to your boat, but further than 5 feet, it's just black and just floating along in a perfect breeze. And then one time there was a whale, and it was on my qualifying passage out in Maine, and it was like quiet gray morning, and I was standing on the companionway, halfway up, halfway down kind of thing, and with my head out in the open, and all of a sudden I could just hear this, and I looked to my side, and there, like right next to my boat, was a whale, and the surface part of his body was almost as big as my boat, and he was just sitting right there. And all I could think about was this was his home. And here I was. So the goal for the race for me was to learn as much as I could and not to die. So I was really pleased when I found out that I was keeping up with the 2 other Morris Justines that were in the race. I did cross Bluebird's bow towards the end of day 4, but it turns out he was the one going the right direction. I predict wind was telling us the wind was going to veer around, and so I had this idea I was going to go east and it would just clock me right around, and they would be caught downwind. But they explained to me that you hardly ever approach Bermuda from the east, so kind of old knowledge trumped me. Most notable thing about my finish was that I had to tack final approach. My dad's home watching me on the tracker. And he thought I was sailing past Bermuda, and he was calling my wife, trying to convince her she needed to call the Coast Guard because I was hurt or asleep or something. So in the end, only 20 out of 29 boats made it to Bermuda, which is a higher than usual rate of attrition, I understand. I put the names of Doug Mann and Richard Lett above their faces in the picture. Both of them have been WYZ members over the years, which made WYZ the most represented yacht club at the race this year. So for my return leg, I found my crew through a guy who'd done the Bermuda 1-2 a lot of times. He initially suggested that I take his son, but his son suggested that I take one of the members of his yacht club. So this is their yacht club down there in Noank, Connecticut. And when I sailed down from Maine, I kept my boat on one of their moorings for 3 weeks. So they just have a pier and a dinghy dock, and everyone's got their boats on moorings. And these guys basically adopted me. And one of the guys fixed that throttle cable problem that I had while I was back in Minnesota. My crew member, Jerry, super handy, willing to do anything. It was really useful to have someone who lived back there as I was trying to prepare all this. Trying to set up something like this from a distance is always challenging. And Jerry was able to go right down to the boat. Jerry also came out. We have a rest week in between the first and the second legs. And so he came out, he and his wife came out for a vacation that week. And he spent at least half of his time helping me fix the boat. And then his wife made us some frozen meals to have each day, although she didn't really appreciate my appetite. But so she had made these awesome frozen meals though, and I shorted out the fridge before the night before. So all of a sudden we didn't have refrigeration. And I thought I was going to lose Jerry. This was just one thing too many. But we filled up the fridge with ice and we did just fine. On the way back, we did experience a gale. I mean, obviously this is not picture taken from the gale. We knew we were heading out into strong winds, and earlier in the week, we had been looking at 25, and then each day it started to get a little more. I don't think anyone ever thought it was going to be over 40 for 24 hours, but, and I didn't have, I actually didn't have wind instrumentation. So that boat nearby said, that's probably what we saw. So our strategy in that storm was to sail about 50 to 60 apparent to the wind, which put us on a pretty good course for Newport. It also allowed us to take the waves on the bow. We had a triple reefed main and that Solent sail, which worked well because we were on port tack like this. We had a slab reef in it, and so with that, we actually sailed nice. I can't say how big I have no way of knowing how big the waves were. But one vivid memory I have is just standing in the cockpit, holding the crossbar, looking up at these waves and just being amazed that my little boat's going to go over them. We ended up getting to the point that we had the sails set, the wind vane was dialed in. The boat was doing what it was going to do. It was unsafe for us on deck, so we just closed up the companionway. And after sitting there looking at ourselves for a couple minutes, we just decided to go to sleep. We came out of the storm pretty well. I think we definitely surprised Zipporah, who's Doug Mann on Express 37, when we were within radio distancing of him in the morning. I definitely think with a little more sea-kindly boat, it enabled us to sail the line we wanted, and we kept up with ostensibly much faster boats. Some of the damage this trip, I mean, the boom actually didn't break this trip. So those two pictures at the bottom, but this chock, this thing sitting on the bedspread used to be mounted on the corner of the boat, and the stay for the Solent was tensioned. So there was a block and tackle at the base of the stay, at the base of the, at the base of the stay. And then we ran the line back to a winch at the cockpit. But before I went to the winch, we turned it on this chock that was mounted here. So this thing came flying off and hit me in the shoulder. So that was kind of startling. We broke this is the companion, the next picture down here on the bottom left. This is looking into the V berth. And we broke the companionway ladder. I braced myself against it sideways and it gave way. And that white is just a drifter sail that I have that I pulled out to cushion it. But just a few months after the race, the boom gave way. So this is the boom where it attaches to the gooseneck. So you can see the gooseneck in the far right picture. And that was welded onto this boom, and it just broke on a day of light sailing. So somewhere during that storm, we basically did this damage, and it just hadn't fallen apart yet. So the stupidest thing I did was I laid down, I had just laid down in my bed and I was all dry and I was wearing just my underwear. And then all of a sudden I could hear the propeller turning, which means it hadn't feathered. So all I had to do was go this short distance out to the helm. And it was, of course, in the middle of that storm. So, you know, I dashed out there, intending to grab to the helm and just throw it in gear, throw it in forward, and then throw it in neutral. The thing will probably feather. And I slipped in my bare feet, fell sideways, hit my ribs on the cockpit on the corner of the bench right there, all while my crew member just watched in horror. And the rest of the trip, I thought I had a broken rib, which was considerably difficult to get up and down the companionway with. So that kind of got to be an old problem after the trip. So like I said, there's really a sense of community around this event. And the event actually fosters a lot of that. They host the GAMs. They have the radio contact. They encourage radio contact underway. And spending a week in Bermuda. I mean, that's fixing our boats. So there's also, and there's just a network of people along that part of the East Coast who are attached to the race. And they're just so willing to step forward and do anything they can. I had people driving me to West Marine. I had people taking me grocery shopping. You know, people were just bending over backwards to help. Even people in the general sailing community. I emailed this guy, Brian Toss, a question about some of the splices. He and I got, and he asked me what I was doing. I told him about the 1-2, and so all of a sudden he's making double sure I have all my splices right. So I guess I really didn't expect that much of a community. I mean, it was wonderful. It was very welcoming, and I probably didn't know how much help I needed, and it was kind of as if they did. I asked one guy, I actually asked him one time, I said, you know, a lot of people help me out. He's just like, you know, and he just said, yeah, we've all been there. So, but it's wonderfully supportive community. This picture is a couple of the class 40s at the race. There were 5 of those. So one thing I've tried to do to keep my my efforts here sustainable is to get my family on board. And you know, so we've taken a lot of trips on the boat, and we've everyone gets on board on projects. This is Kate up at the top of the mast. And this is the end of the talk. And this is the this is the final rankings for everything. So I'm one of the Morris 36s. So there are 3 of them this year. You can see there are 5 class 40s, and there are the minis as well. So anyway, I could either, I mean, if people want to look at that for a minute, I mean, if they're curious what boats were in it.
Hey, Walter, this is Jolene.
Oh, geez, I went over time.
No, you're good. You're good. I mean, we'll start with the questions here, but I think people might like it if you turned your video on, you know, so they can kind of feel like they're getting to know you.
Yeah. Sorry. Was it weird? Should I have had it? Was it weird?
No, you're good. You're good, Walter. You're good.
All right. Okay.
So I think, thank you, Walter, for the talk. This was wonderful. And I think this is where we're going to be doing some Q&A. And what we can do is have individuals type in their Q&A in the Q&A section or the chat section, and we can read them off. We can also have individuals chime in as they wish. We've got 2 actual questions already in the chat, so we're going to start with those, and then we'll go from there. The first one, Walter, is from Kathleen Cahill. What was your most frightening moment from a survival perspective? Were you ever concerned?
You know, it's kind of weird. I like I said, my reaction was almost to go numb and to not really feel the scary stuff, and almost just to plod my way through it. I mean, I can't necessarily, I mean, scary moments. I mean, I remember being up on deck one time and I looked down and my harness was not attached correctly. I mean, if I had fallen overboard, it would have just come undone. I mean, that all of a sudden caused me to jump. but I don't know if there was ever a survival moment. I mean, certainly on the trip going out there, it was rough and it was tiring, but there was nothing scary. The storm was really impressive. I was amazed by it, but I don't think there was any time that our safety was at risk. I mean, there are times on the boat when you just feel like so many things are going wrong that you can start to feel overwhelmed. And sometimes it's just the enormity of everything that's happening to you and being thrown at you and how uncomfortable you are. But my reaction a lot of times was just to go numb almost and just get things done, if that answers.
Got it. Okay. Next question was, hoping you can talk about the feeling of arriving in Bermuda, also the sense of risk you were taking, your family support or questioning of your decision.
All right. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I pulled up into Bermuda and it was probably, I think it was like 6 o'clock at night or something like that. And we had to, I mean, first of all, you had to figure out where to go and then come into this little dock. And one of the crew officials was there. And I think he just laughed at me because, you come off your boat and then you step onto well, first of all, I crashed into the dock. And then, not a big crash, but I mean, it wasn't a smooth landing. And then you're just kind of stupid. And then I took a step ashore and it was like my legs started to buckle. I mean, I didn't fall, but it was just, yeah. And your brain is not ready to focus on anything else at that point. You're just, and you're just spent. As far as, awareness of the risk I was taking, I think I was very aware of the risks. And I mean, my response to my way to deal with it was really trying to think of every possible safety thing I could do. And now, one of the reasons I was actually doing this was to make myself safer because we had this goal. We were going sailing as a family. And actually, when I scheduled this trip, we had thought we might not go in 2019. And then we decided 2019 was a good time for us to go for our family and our kids and everything. So we decided, and I advocated, I really need to continue this trip. I mean, first of all, I've got this team of people who I've been working with who've been helping me fix up the boat, ready the boat. And second, it's such a, it seemed like bad karma to switch out of it because there was so much I was gaining from being part of the race, and pulling back from it just seemed to be setting myself up for failure. So I guess I rationalized away a lot of the risks and just thought about, what I was going to get out of it.
Got it. Thank you. That was from Larry Richmond. Next one is from Craig Smith. He said, first and foremost, very interesting, Walter, thanks. And what's the thinking on the solo out, two back format?
Yeah, they started doing it in 1977 and they've just been doing it that way. So I don't know what their thinking is, but it does, it does create a nice environment. I mean, where you got a bunch of people who are doing this as single-handers. And then, in a way, it gives we're looking for 30 crew members each year. And people have a hard time finding good crew members. People find crew members that just don't know how to sail. So if anyone ever wants to do the race, there are opportunities to crew as the two. So, but I don't know where it originally came from.
Great, okay. So Pontus also said, maybe I missed it, but what did you use for weather routing?
Oh, yeah. So I didn't talk specifically about that. So I had, I used an Iridium Go, which, and you can still use a sat phone and a modem, and I had used that before, but it seemed like the interface with a lot of the companies, both with Oceans and Predict Wind and some of the others, are really gearing up to work specifically with the Iridium Go. And I also thought it might be nice to have on a year aboard. So I went with that, and I had an external antenna permanently mounted, and the Iridium Go is set up, mounted, and always plugged in. And then I subscribed to Predict Wind, which is allowed. They allow you to have subscription things that other people can have, and they specifically spell out Predict Wind and oceans are okay. You can't use a weather router during the race. A lot of people did use someone like, well, there's like Weather Routers International helped some people. I know one guy went with Chris Parker for weather route advice before the race. So with the Iridium Go, I was able to download, grid files. I could see forecasts, and I could route my own boat, and I had my own polars programmed into the Predict Wind, so I could have that information too.
I'm just going to jump in here real quick. So I know we're at 8 o'clock or just past 8 o'clock, but I can stay on here as long as we need to. So if people need to hop off, we understand that. Thank you so much for coming. Otherwise, Walter, if you want to keep asking questions, there are plenty more in the chat, and I suspect we got a few people who'd like to ask them live as well.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Awesome. Okay, we'll continue down the list, and then we'll kind of open it up to everybody. How about that? The next one is from Chris Fittipaldi, and I think everybody has this question on their mind. First and foremost, good job, Walter. And so, will you do it again?
Yes, I am absolutely planning on the race happening this year. I'm acting as if it's going to happen. Actually preparing this talk was good for me because it made me go through everything and try and, remember everything again, put it all in my mind. So I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I plan to go out there. We're going to go out as a family in the first half of April. We'll do a family trip on the Chesapeake to kind of warm the boat up. Then they're going to go stay with my wife's sister while I stay on the boat for a week. I'll work remotely, but that'll give me evenings and a chance to set things up with people out there. Do all this from Annapolis. And then I'll go out in May and sail the boat up to Newport on some weekend and hopefully find a crew member for that. Yeah, I'm absolutely planning on doing it again.
Great. Okay. We've got a question from Scott Brigham. Walter, what in the end happened to your electronics major issue, especially losing your AIS?
So on the way back, so Jerry was able to scrounge up a chart plotter for the way back. And that did give us navigation and AIS again. So that stuff started working. The autopilot didn't start working. I think what the problem was the autopilot RAM itself was failing, and it was drawing amps, too many amps through the control head. So what I was seeing was the control head kept burning out, and I kept replacing it, but I think I wasn't getting to the heart of what the problem was. And so then I suspect because this stuff is so integrated, that probably fried the chart plotter somehow. I just think it's just too much of a coincidence. I mean, maybe they're both just unrelated. It was a little bit old. But I never fully got to the bottom. The system was old, and I just replaced the entire system in order to go cruising for a year with the family.
Got it.
So,
and by the way,
and then just one thing I did is I just upgraded to the next level of autopilot just to have a little more dependency.
Oh, that makes sense. By the way, Pontus just put out a public service announcement to everyone that he's available to crew. So if ever there's a question, reach out to him. Looks like one of the final questions, at least on the chat right now, is from Pete Shellquist. And I was wondering this too. For meal planning and prep, what worked well and what would you not do again?
So I kind of like to eat well offshore. I I'm very lucky I don't get seasick, so I can go downstairs and cook. And I pretty much had my yogurt and granola for breakfast. I had coffee. I had a way to, I had a hot pot that I could store hot water in if I needed to, like a restaurant style hot pot. And that was bungeed to one of the bulkheads in the kitchen. So I could keep hot water that way. I did have beans, so I could grind them and make my French press coffee if I had time for a good cup of coffee. And then I also had those Starbucks instants. And then for lunch, I just had sandwiches every day. I think I had a lot of salami stuff, but I tried to keep, I tried to eat really well with, avocados and cucumbers and, and trying to eat a lot of fruits, apples and oranges. And I really try and, maintain good nutrition. And then I've got some fairly elaborate meals that I'll try and do offshore. I've even got a beef stew. I don't think I did the beef stew this trip, but I would try and take time to cook. I had brought along some freeze-dried meals in case I needed them, but didn't end up stooping that low. Nice things to have would be like a can of, you could combine some things like a can of chickpeas, a can of, Indian sauce, maybe some canned spinach, something you can all put together and put in one pot. I did make myself Caesar salads. I did make myself pasta with meat. And sometimes cooking could be a vulnerable time. And there was sometimes I don't strap myself in when I cook because I think getting burned is a worse option. But so there was one time I got thrown fully across the cabin and through the bathroom door cooking. But so I did try and, keep myself well fed. And then I had a lot of Cokes. I like drinking Cokes offshore because it has both caffeine and sugar. So it kind of keeps me up for an extra hour at night. So I would, have one or two of those a day. And then I would just try and remember to be drinking fluid because it's just amazing. Just how it just, once you pass the Gulf Stream, you're pretty much in warm water, in warm weather. So, and you're just getting dehydrated. So.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Dallas actually put a question out to the group, but before we actually go to that, he's saying, how would we like to see a solo series? We can chat about that afterwards. Does anybody want to pop on and ask more questions of Walter directly?
Hey, Walter.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Scott Brigham. Have you learned to like your monitor wind vane yet?
Oh, I've learned to love my monitor wind vane. I really use it every chance I can. And I think there's a difference in the way the boat sails with the monitor wind vane compared to even using, so I have a brand new autopilot right now, which actually, so having an autopilot makes it really a lot easier to learn the wind vane. They talk about in the book, they talk about becoming a vane sailor. It's like a cult, but it starts with getting the sails balanced and just this whole system, just getting it balanced just right and understanding the mechanics of how all it works is fascinating in itself, but not going into that now. But because it's sailing, so it's adjusted. So the wind vane is keeping you sailing to an apparent wind. So, and it's very sensitive. And the way it moves your helm is the further you're off, the harder it's moving you. But when you're straight, and then the less you're off, so it kind of brings you back onto course, much like the way a person would, as opposed to when you have the autopilot set to the wind vane, to the wind control setting on your autopilot. It's just, it doesn't feel the same, and it's just, when you get the boat into the groove on the wind vane and everything's going, you'll just stay there. And it's just wonderful how the boat sails. And the mechanics of it are just elegant, and I love to talk about that with people all the time. But yes, I'm very happy with the monitor wind vane.
Thank you.
It's been cool. Yeah. And incidentally, there was only one other guy in the whole race that had a wind vane, and that was a guy who he'd done the original race in 1977, and so he was coming back to do it again. And I didn't get to know him much. He had but he had a wind vane, so it was just him and I. So.
Great. Walter, this is Jolene. I found a couple of older questions or chats a little farther up, or questions farther up in the chat. So one was from Rudy saying, how long did it take for leg 1 and how many miles?
All right. So if we go back, let me see. So I think if we go back to the slides, so each one is 635 miles. So if you look at my actual finish time, so it took me 115 hours, whereas it took some of the class 40s 92 hours. So that's what we're looking at. So 115 hours. So that's 5 hours, 5 days, almost 6 days. So, or no, almost 5 days, because 5 days would be 120 hours. So 5 hours short of 5 days. So was there another part to that? Sorry. Yeah.
No, I think, and just how many miles?
635 nautical miles, which somewhere it said that was 725, but that doesn't sound right. Nautical mile is usually 1.1 of a statute mile. But anyway, 630 nautical miles.
Hey, Walter, this is Rudy. Real quick. It looked like you got a first. Did you get any kind of hardware?
Well, you get this, all you get. No, I didn't get a first. I got a third out of the Justines. I mean, the way I just considered myself racing against the other Justines, they give you this little pickle dish. And it used to have a plaque on it saying Bermuda 1-2, but it's somewhere down in my boat somewhere. The plaque fell off. No, I mean, I was 7th. I was 7th overall with the perf handicapping, but I don't think a handicap can, I mean, the class 40s had a -9 handicap and I had like a 180 something. So, I mean, yeah, there's no way. So, but yes, my official finish was 7th. So.
All right, and one more question here from Reed. Have you done much sailing on the Great Lakes? And if so, how does it compare to the Big Pond?
You know what? I have not done a lot of sailing on Superior. You know, I'm not a Midwesterner. I come from, you know, I grew up in San Francisco and then I lived, you know, back in New Hampshire. And we thought about that. It was actually my wife's original idea was that we'd get a cruising boat up on Superior. And I just wanted to be near the ocean. So yeah, I have not given Superior its due. And it's probably one of the things that here I am in Minnesota and really haven't taken advantage of Superior. And instead I go out to the ocean. So anyway, it is what it is.
Thanks. A few more have come in, and I was wondering about this one too. It's from Paul Holden, or excuse me, first of all, Byron, what other races do you feel best prepared you for this?
Well, all right. I mean, I felt, I don't know what other races. I hadn't done any other races in the Justine, and I really haven't been. I haven't been raced. I haven't raced. You know, I raced over at Shorewood. I mean, Shorewood has these races every like 5 a summer, and I would win every time. So, I mean, you can imagine the competition. I don't win, obviously, at Wayzata. I mean, yeah, sure. Racing at Wayzata is pretty much all the racing I'd done. I did do this main rocks race, but that was really a reason to be offshore. You know, I think when I'm talking to people about being crew for me, I'm more interested almost in wilderness survival skills than in sailing skills, because I can tell someone, you know, what they need to do to sail the boat. But when you're out there and you're getting bashed around, you know, I'd much rather, you know, hear that someone spent a month on a canoe in the boundary waters than they had chartered a boat a bunch of times, because it's that kind of, you know, resourcefulness, thinking, and being able to continue to plug away in the face of, you know, nature just pounding you. That, I mean, seems like that's the important factor.
Got it. Okay. And from Paul Holden, how did you have enough water? Did you have to make water? How did you handle that?
Okay, so yeah, so my boat will carry 90 gallons of water. So I have 60 I can carry in the bow, and then I have 30 in one of my side tanks. And basically I drained my bow to keep it lighter and just went with the 30 in my side tanks. I think I put 10 in my bow as a safety. And then I think I obviously I had bottles of water in my ditch bag. And I think they made me put like 4 days supply of water in there or something ridiculous. Yeah, so yeah, the boat itself carried plenty of water. Yeah, I don't have a water maker. And when we were offshore, when we lived on the boat for a year, we would just have to, you know, find a place to fill up with water. So.
Great. Those are all the questions in the chat. Anyone else?
Awesome. Well, thanks you guys for setting this up. It was kind of fun to have to rehash all this stuff for myself. So.
Yeah.
Thank you, Walter.
Thanks, Walter.
It was pretty amazing.
And
Yeah.
Barb, if you want to jump in, you can.
Was someone wanting to ask one more question, I heard? No? Okay. We don't want to go to bed yet. We want to hear more Walter stories. That was fantastic, Walter, really. I realize your bedtime reading and mine are quite different. I did realize that, and you sure did your homework. I think we should make some rubber bands that we wear around our wrist, and it would say WWWD. What would Walter do? Because
no, probably my daughter would tell you no, don't do it.
Okay. Well, you sound like a MacGyver to me. Many of us sail with, you know, 3 to 4 on our race nights, let alone 1 to 2 across open seas. So that's very impressive. Thank you so much. If everyone enjoyed tonight's presentation, the WYC Membership Committee invites you to come back in 2 weeks on Tuesday, February 23rd to hear more adventures. So thank you so much, everyone.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Walter. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, Jillian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Walter.
Walter, thank you very much. That was wonderful. Nicely done.